today I had another topic. Last time we spoke about things to do to get into, like, for triathletes to do when it comes to swimming, or what is important to do. And we also touched the grinding part, what to do in a session. You need to do intervals, you need to how to train properly to get it there. Today I would like to zoom out a bit, and my question or my topic would be an overall plan to ace swimming at the end of it. So let's say you have a race coming up in half a year, and how do you want to ace that? We want to neglect the cycling part and the running part, because people need to do that on their own, and we are not the experts on that. Maybe I start with saying that for me it usually has three parts, like the start part where you really get into volume, then the part where you go into getting that 100% and more, and getting into this VO2 max or these kind of things. And then later on, it's just the tapering part. I don't know, how is it with you, or do you have two peaks in it, or how do you see that?
Well, I think there are general multiple approaches. The first one being what you are describing as more of a, how do I say this, more dividing it into different blocks. Let's say you generally start with a low aerobic block, then you work a little bit more intensity before maybe go into really high intensity and lactate threshold, and then you taper. I generally don't do that. I found that at my time in Florida and at my time in Würzburg, it worked best if we keep repeating the key sessions or the key parts of a good swimming program over and over and over, and basically adjust more on the volume. So let's say we have 2 aerobic interval sets in a week, 1 aerobic long set in a week, maybe 1 or 2 strength sets in a week, and then depending on the season, 1 or 2 lactate threshold intensive sets in a week. Now I'm talking about competitive pool swimmers. I think if you talk about the triathletes, I think the high lactate sets we can almost neglect.
Yeah.
Especially for the Ironman guys. But basically how it would work is that almost stays exactly the same, but the interval sets will change. So let's say in week 1, could be possible that we start out with 1850s.
Yeah.
Okay, so total duration maybe 15, 60 minutes. Then in week 2, we might work our way up to 100s and maybe 20, 22 minutes in length. And then maybe in week 6, we are swimming a combination of 400s and 100s, or 400 and 200s. And we build the duration of the aerobic set up to maybe 45 minutes to 50 minutes. And then in between, we would be coming back down to shorter intervals again towards the main competition. And that's the same with the aerobic swim. So basically it would work up and then come down. And I think that's an approach that I like a lot, because if you have these same components in your weekly routine, then it's not going to kill you if, let's say, you get a flu and you miss 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And you're working in like aerobic block, and then next comes an intense block, and let's say you have a 4-week aerobic block, and you're sick 3 weeks of that, then you're missing the complete aerobic block before you go into an intense block. So I find you're a little bit more able to adjust.
Mm-hmm. Forgiving,
a little bit more forgiving. Exactly, that's what I'm looking for. And that's worked well for me in the past. And I know a bunch of programs who are quite successful with that. For example, I talked back in the day to Martin Grodzki. He was a very successful college distance swimmer from the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah.
And Georgia has a pretty rich tradition in distance swimming also. Of course, not quite as good as the Gators, which I obviously have to say now, but I'm joking. But nevertheless, they're very good. And he said their week is always exactly the same. They know exactly what's waiting for them when they come to the pool. They always know, for example, Wednesday afternoon is suit up, go fast. And it's always the same. But the coaches, they they kind of tweak a little bit with the volume and the intensity depending on where they are in the season.
Well, that's actually very interesting because, as I said, I was taught and how I teach is really this block mentality. I have my let's say if it's 6 months from now. So for you, I wouldn't say it doesn't matter, but for you it's 6 months. But each week in this 6 months looks the same, but you go up in volume and go down in volume. And for me, it's really I have 50-60% in the first block, and like the 50-60% of the time at the beginning is block 1, aerobe, volume, get it there, and then 40%, not 40%, 30% would be just VO2 max, like threshold, like really the tough bit, and afterwards tapering. And so I was trained, and so I trained myself. For me, it worked, and then I guess it did. But I guess I like the point which you're making, and I think it would be more suitable for triathletes to have that approach as well, because you might get sick, as you said, you get the flu, and so you don't miss out. And as you said, if you're healthy all the way through, it can work. It's just a long streak, 6 months. But if you get sick, so actually. It's interesting. It's very interesting. Well, I was coached, that's more the Russian mentality. So my coach was Russian. One of his best friends was Gennady Turetsky and Popov, and they all trained like that. They had this long duration, and they needed it. So that's why I don't have a problem with it. There are pluses, like there are pros and cons, I guess, on it.
Yeah, for sure. What I also like about the approach of repeating very similar things over and over is that the taper is not necessarily that big of a surprise for your body, because it's almost the same, just everything a little bit less. Yeah. So I find that you're not really in that situation of the classic taper shits or whatever you call that, where all of a sudden nothing is working together anymore. It's not as profound, or not as strong. And yeah, it works quite well. And then what I usually do is with my swimmers and also with the triathletes, I like to work in 4-week cycles.
Yeah.
With week 1 usually being the long week, week 2 being the intense week, week 3 being the recovery week, and then week 4 could be a test week. So it's either a 3 or 4 week cycle. But then again, the weeks are still looking fairly similar. What might change between long week and intense week is that the intense week, instead of 2 aerobic interval sets, would have 1 aerobic interval set and 2 intense, like 2 lactate threshold sets, and vice versa. But yeah, I found that worked pretty well with
what in terms of volume? So for me, with my version of it, I guess it's the volume would always be, if I'm gonna go and do Ironman triathlon now, for myself, it was 5Ks and plus. For me now, I mean, the average triathlete would look at it maybe 4 kilometers, 5 kilometers, something around there. For me, it would be even 6-7 Ks to get the volume in, and then the threshold, let's call it phase 2, where you really like get the speed in, would be maybe 4.5-5 Ks, like for me now, coming down, and then the taper would be 2-3 max. So I guess what would it be? So the long week would be also that long, or how did you train, or what volume would you do swim there?
What's the exact question? Like me back in the day as a swimmer, or what would I do with an elite triathlete?
I guess we keep it as a triathlete. I guess if you would coach a triathlete.
Probably pretty similar to what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean, with Sebastian Kienle, who is up to this day probably one of, I think I had one other pro, but the most well-known pro that I work with, it will probably look like that. Like a general week would be 6 sessions. One is usually very easy with 3 to 4K.
Yeah.
The others would be 5 to 6, in extreme cases 7K.
Yeah.
And then the taper would be like 2.5, 3K, something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, and it would last about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
coming gradually down from the 6K towards the 2 and 3K.
And then you do the cycle again in the end.
Yeah, what I've done with pool swimmer, for example, now worked out really well. One of my best ones qualified for the Junior European Championships last week.
Yeah.
Almost broke the German age group record in the 400 freestyle. I went to 353.
Yeah.
At age 17, 150.0.
Wow.
And I mean, with these guys, I tend to need 2 or 3 shots because I need to get to learn about the athlete and know how they respond.
Yeah.
And he's one of those guys who doesn't really like taper. I think it's more of a mental thing, but it's an important part, obviously. So with him, I remember we had this past weekend was Berlin. The week before was Heidelberg. The weekend before, we were still in Greece in the training camp. And the week leading up to that, in the beginning of the week, so Monday to Wednesday, he was still going 9K in the morning and 6K at night. So 9K very generic and then 6K intense. 9K generic, 6K intense. 9K generic, 6K intense.
Okay.
Then one single easy, and then we went to 7K, 5K, 7K, 5K, 7K, 5K. Then 2 days very easy because of the travel. Then we went straight into the taper, which was about, for Heidelberg, like 4Ks, 3.5, 4Ks. And then there he already went 355 and 151 and 806 and 800. And then the week after, we just stayed low with Monday after Heidelberg 4K, and then 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, and then it was basically really good at Berlin then.
Wow.
So that's a taper for distance, middle distance.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's interesting. I like the fact what you said about the taper in general. You know, that you don't fall so much in a hole. Let's put it that way, and then you're out of place. It doesn't feel great, and nothing works, and you lose faith in your abilities, because I had this all the time, and for me I was most of the time the only distance swimmer in the whole group. I could do all of it, and when I went to a competition, I had a lot of different races, and always the big ones. For me, it was horrible. This time was the worst. I mean, that's why I like what you do. So and I'm getting now into that phase as well with mine, because I have Hamburg in on the 4th of June. So I'm slowly going into threshold, going into taper with my version of the training plan. So I'm starting to feel not so great anymore, and if you can avoid that, I mean, to try this one for myself. I mean, I like.
You can always do. I had another one. They're very similar in body type. The other one that I had was Oliver Klemet. He's now swimming with Bernd Berghahn in Magdeburg.
Yeah,
he left because I went to Portugal for 1.5 years. But he was also one of the guys, just generally pretty light guy. He was maybe 60 kilograms, and he also, what you can do is you can still keep the volume up as long as you have next to no intensity. So if you don't really like taper, I know a lot of guys who do really well with a 5K, even 6K swim. Let's say you race on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Some of these guys would still go 6K and 5K in the beginning of the week all the way to Wednesday, then do a drop taper and do Thursday like 2.5K.
Yeah.
And then go to the competition. Also works well.
Yeah.
You just can't go 6K hard. If you go 6K and maybe 2.5 or 3K with fins, 2K or 1K is pulling, and it's just easy swimming, then this can also work pretty well.
Yeah. No, I like it. Or you're like, we already mentioned his name before, you're like Tom Dolan, and you're gonna just beast through it. You're gonna do just the volume, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know how he tapered. I
don't think
I
he
just
did.
know that one story about the 40K.
Yeah. No, but I don't believe he did ever. I mean, I guess he did it through volume. He got his level up to that his fast is as fast as Olympic speed, let's put it that way, and that he could do. And he didn't have these peaks, He brought his level up and was always fast in general, I guess. I can imagine. But there. So okay, 2 approaches. One, like I have it, where you really have these three blocks of training: volume, threshold and speed and taper, but you have it in a long streak, so you stretch it out for 6 months to the event, and you would have the approach where you have all elements in a week, every week the same, but there you adjust the volume just like that, or intensity as well to a certain extent, and alternate. I guess pros with me is that you sort of have a certain plan, and if it works out, if you can hold it up, I guess for me it worked as such, and for long distance that could work in the end. But I guess yours is more for a triathlete. I would prefer that. If it's not like me, for me as a swimmer, but for a triathlete who would start out, I would also try your version of it, I think.
Yeah, and the training plans within this amazing membership are very, very close to that.
Yeah,
they're pretty repetitive.
Yeah.
With them, I usually have tests every 4 to 6 weeks. But yeah, I think that's also something that's important. I mean, going all the way back to the beginning of your question, I think for triathletes, I think it's important to face the truth every now and then, and maybe think about a good test set and do that within these 6 months, probably 4 to 6 times.
Yeah.
So you really know where you're at. It could be 1,000 straight swim for time, could be 3,000 for time if you want to go really hard, it could be just a 400-meter test, but I think it's important to monitor. I think it's not a good idea to just train for 6 months and hope for the best without ever adjusting on the way.
No, yeah, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, so that's also what I would do. Yeah.
You need the races. I mean, I chose a bit of a different approach this time around. I think we can conclude this topic with that. I think we can go more into detail, or as you said, Swim Amazing has its plans. You have it on Swim Amazing, and also I have it with Scale Swimming, where I just give some sort of an idea of a training as such, and where I explain it in the training book as such. I think we have two approaches, and I think both work, or the mix maybe. Yeah. So for that, yeah, I didn't even want to know what I wanted to say. So I think I forgot what you tried to say. Oh, the racing. Sorry. I drifted off a bit. I forgot my train of thought. No, the racing thing is, I did it differently because we had too many races throughout the year, and this time also last I do tests within the in the sessions. So, for example, I go all out 1,500 meter, also in running or in cycling, but I don't have competitions. I didn't want it. I explicitly said I didn't want it. Back in the days, I would have, out of these 52 weekends, I would have 30 weekends racing. And some of it were trainings, as you said. It is like when one of our other calls, you said trainings, competitions. But I didn't want that at all. I just have my event. I'm going to Hamburg. Last year was Klagenfurt. Break it or make it. And otherwise, I try again later, because I think I needed to change something for myself. But that's a different version. I guess it makes sense to have races in the meantime, if you're not experienced as we are in racing, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Ironman is a completely different thing, and I've never done one, so I can't really talk. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a very special day, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember one thing, one quote from Sebi back in the day. He had many good ones, but let me see if I get the one correctly. He said one thing. He always said he would rather be at the starting line 90% fit and 100% recovered than 100% fit and 90% recovered.
Okay, makes sense.
So what I'm trying to say is, if you get to the starting line and you already did 6 races just to prove to yourself how good in shape you really are, you might have nothing left in the tank for the big one, especially mentally.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then the other one he always said, there's a very fine line between fit and fucked. That was one of his favorites.
Well, that's a good one. That's a good one too. But
So those are the ones that
I like the one with the thing the 90% and the 100% because I think for me it was back in the day I was exactly that. I was 100% fit, but mentally from competitions only 90% recovered. And I think that was the issue. And this is here different because I'm going out and it's also enjoyment, you know. I'm no pro anymore. Like we've done that. It's good. Last time was just amazing to go there, right? I mean, yeah. So yeah, let's conclude with that. This excursion on the training, overall training. As I said, if the people who are listening to it follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and also on Swim Amazing on his homepage. I will have it in the caption of this video, and also Scale Swimming as for training books, so we can get an idea of what to do. And otherwise, you reach out to us, both of us, and if you have other questions, let us know. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Fun as always.
Fun as always.